Look at this. This is just amazing. Rick,
all right, we'll get
killer, dude. Couldn't hear a thing, but I'm just imagining.
When the amps crank to 11, you will.
Oh yeah. Okay,
Bob,
ready?
what happened to your hair?
Pretty weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of freaking me out.
I wear a hat now.
That's why I wear one. You have hair, though.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know what I was thinking.
It looks good. It looks good, and you supported, a local business, because I'm sure you didn't go to a massive global chain to go get a haircut.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's rock out, man.
Okay.
Noise reduction tech works really well.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Are you using
Oh, yeah.
Dude, that's going to sound so awesome when we actually hear it. Yes.
It was great.
That's the wonders of Zoom. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this battle royale of cloud, or is it edge? Are we talking about cloud or edge? Edge, right? Yeah. So
There is no edge.
Oh, no.
Power to the people.
Okay, this is going to be really bad, I can tell. Yeah. All right, so last week we talked about edge, and it was Rob, Marc, and I. And I know that the others on our panel missed out. I know you guys are chomping at the bit to get at this. I know that there were some words that were exchanged, some gastrointestinal issues that were exchanged. So let's go at it. Come on. So the guys that missed out, why don't you start out and react to some of the stuff that we shared last week?
Well, I did put up the list, the top 10. And the first one was the whole endpoint versus edge, or certain people out there calling an endpoint the edge. What is that? Come on. Yeah, well, let's be serious. So that was my first disagreement. The endpoints do perform a function as part of whatever this thing is, but let's please not call the endpoint the edge just because you've got a little bit of processing power. You're missing a lot, and it's not right, and it's confusing. So that is gripe number uno.
Score.
What about, hey, David, what about the carriers that use the term edge networking all of the time, and that further confuses clients? Enterprise customers are like, edge networking versus edge when it comes to IoT. So I'm hearing a lot of that. It's like that word becomes so popular that it's now being tied into all of these different meanings in different areas of the network and of IoT versus, it's just, it further complicates things for especially enterprises that are like seeing the marketing messages from the carriers that are really, really hyping up their edge when it comes to building out their network versus edge solutions for IoT.
Yeah.
But and the messaging. So you're right, and I love the Linda Blair Terminator glasses. By the way, I will answer this question so I don't get terminated. But the messaging. There are some carriers that have a better and more clear and more authentic message than others. I'll explain. Rob dropped a bit of knowledge. I took the note that so there's a default location to the edge, right? And we know it's distributed. So let's just say locations. So you've got carriers that have effectively been on a virtualization journey for some time. They might have virtualized the baseband unit of their existing 4G network. So that actually frees up physical space. And within that physical space, now they're able to bring compute and storage and processing. So there's this physical location that we hear about, the edge of the RAN, of the radio access network. So not every carrier is providing that, that level of specificity. Then we also have the MEC, right? That mobile edge compute. Where is that default location for that? Is that at the edge of the RAN, or will it be deployed within a customer's premise? So I think the questions from the buyer and the seller is, if location is important, have that conversation with your supplier, with your partner, or whoever. If it's other things are, if it's the latency that's important, or the cost model, or the business model, what is it that's important, and what does this ultimately do? That gets us away from my edge is better than your edge, and let's call it 16 different things. So that is how I would, respond to your question, my dear Stephanie.
No, that's good. I think that the other thing that I've heard bring in, I guess, when you talk about the whole edge conversation, is the idea of microcells and picocells from a network perspective, and how those are being brought into some enterprise locations to really amp up from a network connectivity perspective, but they're also using that edge term just because they're, essentially boosting that network at the enterprise location. So I've also heard it there as well.
Yeah, but then now that's all becoming the whole private network thing, right?
Yes.
Hosted private network, and so there's even...
It has nothing to do with the network, though. I would start with it as nothing to do with the network, right? It's kind of building on, it's a functional problem, right? Let's just forget the terms for a little bit. It's a distributed computing problem, right? And we've got abilities that we need in different places, scalability, availability, all of these kinds of functional things that determine what workloads we run where, right? So in last week's discussion, there was some discussion comparing kind of an industrial IoT use case, typically heavy. I mean, that's been on, I think it's on-prem, right? Someone used that word. Those workloads have been there for a long time. Even today, 90 to 95% of those workloads will remain on-site for a lot of good reasons, from cybersecurity, latency, availability. But there is a real opportunity to bring some cloud abilities towards the edge, right? To be able to have commodity hardware that you can just provision and use, to have platform as a service capabilities that many apps can consume at the edge. Those would all be cool features. But think of it, I like to think of it as just that. It's a distributed computing problem, and there's some interesting, we have better tools than we did 20 years ago to deploy distributed computing applications. But the specific use cases will dictate what's best for each. I also think we might want to think about, what are the tools we're going to use to build these applications? It's really quite challenging, right? Remember when cloud first came out? Understanding how to build a scalable, reliable cloud app was hard, right? And that's evolved a little bit. So what are we going to do on that front? And then I think, the underlying technologies you talked about last week around not moving too many bits around, right? That's like for video and so on. Those are just, again, specific use cases that dictate what technologies we might choose to use to solve.
Now, Rick, at the risk of getting virtually punched in the mouth, which is okay too in certain times, in order for this distributed computing to do all that it's cracked out to be, not some, but all of it, it needs to be networked, because you don't send, right? Like you won't do, you can have a multi-cloud environment and good reasons for that. I 100% agree that the majority of things will get processed on-prem for good reasons, but there's so much hope of like, oh no, like there's really good reasons of me having this workload on this person's cloud because of this outcome. So I like the idea of separating the parts and separating the network, but I see that it has to be networked for the outcomes to be realized. Okay.
Absolutely. And then, if you look in a industrial setting, you still have stuff connected, even it might be networked over like a serial connection, a multi-drop. I mean, you have this crazy stuff out there. Rob's encountered that stuff. So you're absolutely right. It's a necessary capability, But similarly, like I wonder if Rob brought up a great point last week about the manageability of these things, right? You start delivering edge stuff all over the place. In a manufacturing site, for example, typically it's a one-off, right? That app that's running there is unique to that site, that line. Now there's some exceptions to that, but when it is something that you're replicating or distributing, building on Leonard's concept of like, it's almost like a CDN, right? A CDN for delivering, how do I update 10 million Priuses, right? How do I do that efficiently and effectively? On the edge side, I think some real interesting work that a lot of the big cloud vendors are doing is looking at how containerization can play a real important piece of that for two reasons. One is it kind of insulates you, sort of, from OS dependencies and some other kind of software goop at the, junk at the goop at the edge to worry about from compatibility. But similarly, in theory, it gives us a better solution for portability of workloads, right? So maybe in customer A or use case B, it makes sense to run this video analysis algorithm on the vehicle. In another case, maybe it makes sense to run on the local city network for a network of cameras. Let the application dictate that. And again, it goes back to kind of tools and infrastructure. Can containerization play a key role for letting us have that kind of workload portability? I don't know. Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, and
to close on Stephanie's point of, again, the conversation of, in a private network setting, bringing this hardware and distributing it. Let's just go. I've got a big factory, 1 million square feet of stuff. Then there's the architectural argument of, can you physically bring compute and effectively, again, let's call it that customer's edge, and leverage some of the hardware that it is needed for you to deliver and propagate, the right signal for these devices, and leverage that build out to deliver proper, edge compute. That's possible. And there's lots of promising stories coming from, I don't know if Rob's going to talk about this, so I'm just going to go general, in the world of partnerships that are delivering these infrastructures today. Just in Germany, this has been happening for some time. So, there could be some of that. Sorry, Leonard, I'm staying vendor neutral.
Good. Proud of you. I'm just cracking up at Stephanie. I'm just waiting for Amazing to, kind of run across the screen.
Sorry, guys. There's a storm rolling in, so I had to move my location.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay, I thought you were looking for a better view. Awesome.
So one of the other questions, I guess, to the crew is, how do we kind of end the use of these kind of polarizing terms, right? Is it going to take some? Do we have to start talking more about the paradigm? Oh, I hate that word too. The
other P word.
Techniques we use and best practices for building IoT apps within some subclasses, right? Like connected fleet is one sort of model. Connected factories is another model. And I would argue like the smart home and smart city is like a sort of a third model. So maybe that's where the industry's efforts need to be, is sort of reference architectures for some of these kinds of scenarios and educate people on what's out there available and what the best practices are.
Well, I think we need to focus on what's different. Here's one of the things that I noticed in the research that I've done. A lot of what we talk about regarding the edge, it has already been there, whether it's the deployments, whether or not it's the architectures, whether or not it's the solution patterns, they've all been there. And what a lot of folks are basically going to market with and getting excited about is nothing new. In fact, the people who are getting excited are folks who didn't know the other side of the fence already had edge computing. And then the other side of the fence is going, oh, wow, all right, so there's this thing called telco edge cloud. That sounds kind of exciting. So there are these things that are already in place. But the question is, when you talk about edge computing, what is different? Whether it's from this perspective of technology changing the kinds of applications you can develop on the edge, the way that you deploy, the way that you manage or orchestrate these things on the quote unquote edge. And Rob, I like your point of, you kind of threw up in the last episode on my comment about the cloud, but I think there's merit in what we both said, that yes, there's a default location in terms of implementation or the thing that you're trying to deploy in terms of a solution. And, that's by default something that we need to focus on versus looking at the edge in terms of this big nebulous thing that it doesn't really further our conversation, right? It's like, okay, look, if we're going to talk about edge, be specific about what you're talking about. If you can't, then you really don't go do your homework because you don't understand what edge is. You don't understand how technology advancements are influencing how we can build solutions on the edge.
And that's kind of my point, is that whatever the default is situational, right? In the industrial case, it's default kind of on-premise today. In a consumer connected, whatever, it's a blend. Anyway, it is very situational. That's where I think the industry needs to start to kind of communicate how best to and it's a moving target, right? Obviously, we have new technologies and capabilities popping up every day.
I would say also, I think we will get to a point where some of the solution providers will have some kind of walkthrough process that talks about the solution, the latency requirements, the critical information or data that's being needed or exchanged, where the application is, how often do they need access to the data, what happens when the data gets there, and what are the outcomes that are alerting or whatever that's required. And as a result of going through and walking customers through that, whether you do that manually or engineers, meet with them or whatever, but gosh, wouldn't it be great to have that filter through some kind of customer system online where then it actually provides them with varying requirements and options for them so they can better understand what really needs to be pushed off into the cloud versus really this is very critical and this kind of information or this solution you're requesting really needs to be at the edge, or there's some really important components that need to be at the edge. So I think some customers just need a little bit more hand-holding to understand what those requirements are. I mean, we talk about the definitional differences, but sometimes customers don't really care about what you call it. They just need to know what's out there, what's available, and how does it really impact what I'm trying to do right now, and does it improve what I'm trying to do right now? Other than that, they may want to keep it the same because they don't want to mess with it.
Well, another key point Rob made was cost, right? And I think vendors do often, when all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail, right? So every vendor is going to bias it towards what they're selling. But I think Rob's point is critical, is customers need to understand that there are implications of the choices they make, what to run where. And some could be like an order of magnitude cost difference.
Yeah, I agree with the last couple of statements, but the challenge of again, so starting on Stephanie's point of, how can a workflow be shown where a customer is like, hey, I know what I want, and here are the capabilities that I need, right? So let me shop on capabilities. The challenge with that in the real world is that if I am the machine manufacturer, if I am the control and automation manufacturer, if I am the local systems integrator, if I'm just the entire stack, I don't want that because I somehow need to prove that my mousetrap is way better than your mousetrap somehow. So I agree with you because in your comments, Stephanie, there's this customer centricity that came out. You're looking out for the interest and the outcome of this customer, and that's your thinking. But as an industry, that's not how it gets delivered. It does once you're on that one-on-one relationship, or you've been, servicing this customer for 25 years and the trust is there.
Yes.
But it's challenging, depending on which side you are.
Are you having a hurry?
And I also, sorry.
Locations real quick, guys, because a storm's rolling into where I gotta move. It's getting dangerous out here. Hang tight.
Safety
Y'all keep
first.
going.
Safety first.
Get under the edge. Sorry. No, actually, I don't agree with some of the statements said before. Actually, what I understood, it's like, hey, we have this catalog of edge or cloud or whatever IoT deployments on industry, on logistics, on smart home, smart city, whatever. And I haven't seen two projects that are exactly the same. And I can build like a framework or like a blueprint and share it with another customer. Because what I have seen is every customer has different requirements because of their previous technology, because of the knowledge of the decision makers, because of tons of things. So for me, it has been very complex to see this kind of blueprint or framework to share like lessons learned. Well, yeah, not lessons learned, but exactly the same deployment from another customer to
Mark,
another.
but would you say that because you've been doing this for quite some time and you just run across a multitude of use cases? But if you take industry, and let's just go with your local water department, there are folks out there that all they do is I do SCADA and automation for water pumps. That is it. So they're on the opposite edge. I just said edge by accident. They're on the opposite side of having a framework, because they might just do 1 to 3 use cases for 30 years, and for them it all looks the same.
Yeah, no, I agree. But my point goes to, okay, so you find a solution for one water pump company. If you go to the second water pump company, I'm not sure that they will have, even if they do similar technology, I'm not sure they will have like the same requirements or the same needs or the same business case than the first one. And having said that, so I have seen examples of edge computing that are like, it's like a tiny piece of code that's so beautiful, that gives so nice feature to the technology, that it's actually, something really tiny, like, for example, discovering with a GPS where am I, where the device is, in order to define what frequency needs to use to send data, for example, no? And it's actually using like a file with a database of the coordinates of the wall, no, depending on the frequencies. So things like this tiny code. Well, it should be a kind of a tiny code. For me, it's like the beautifulness of the edge computing. It's just this little thing that makes this device run worldwide, and actually helping the device to waste less battery. For example, for me, this is like the perfect use case of edge computing, for example, and that's a super simple use case, for example.
Yeah, is that a smart endpoint, or is that actual edge computing?
Yeah, Mark. So this is the interesting thing, because in the OT universe, the device for some reason is the part of the edge. I mean, it's a component of, no, let me back up front. But in terms of the evolution of the quote unquote technologies, there's a lot of stuff happening on the endpoint that's very different from what's happening at the edge. So I think, going back to what, David, you highlighted, the endpoints shouldn't include the edge. If they include the edge, then everything is the edge. And then if everything is the edge, then we're talking about nothing. As Rob said last time, right?
That's a Rob code. If everything's the edge, nothing's the edge.
Nothing's the edge. So we have nothing to talk about.
Agreed.
And it's an easy out, I think. It's a friggin' easy out, right? For people who don't want to get into the real dirty details about what edge is.
So back to Stephanie's point, customer doesn't care about any of this stuff.
Right.
They just need something that works, right?
Yeah.
So the original edge is a human being I'm taking logs on my Trident submarine. I'm walking around the engine room and I'm looking at gauges and I'm taking readings, making sure the nuclear reactor isn't going berserk. And I'm writing stuff on my clipboard and I'm taking that somewhere else to someone to let them know. I mean, that's what IoT is, right? And I'm either doing it locally on board my submarine and not going to some ridiculous cloud, just like I'm going to have autonomous cars that will not be talking to some cloud to make decisions. They're going to be doing it locally, whatever you want to call that, the edge, the endpoint, some blend of that, who knows? It's just a location.
Can I riff on the great example of where you can do it right, wrong, or other is voice agents. So if you think about the devices you have in your home, right? We're to the point now where technology-wise, it's not a big power requirement, not a big processing requirement. Most of that, if not all of that, could be done at the edge. Why isn't it? Not because it's the right thing to do. It's because other people want to jack into that data stream, right? That's the so there are decisions where people are making architectural decisions that aren't actually optimal, aren't the most secure, aren't the most private, because by moving data outside and off the edge, there's another monetization model. So that's will always complicate the definition of what's best.
Yeah. I always feel bad for, you've seen these examples over the years in the consumer IoT space, all the gadgets and stuff that were connected to a cloud. And then the company goes out of business and customers paid $400 for this thing and now it's dead. And it doesn't do anything anymore because the cloud disappeared. And a lot of people are like pushing back on that whole model. It's like, wait a second, I paid a lot of money for this and I was dependent on this cloud and you guys bought the farm and now nothing works. Yeah. I can imagine a lot of pushback. Just connecting things.
I forget if it was the EU or someone recently was talking, is kind of doing an inquiry into that kind of challenge, right? These closed ecosystems and the risk of obsolescence and so on. But certainly, as you point out, home automation is a great example. A lot of dead, dumb devices out there. Even some big codes have done the same things. Not always small companies that went out of business. Big companies buy them and kind of decide, we're gonna turn it off. Sorry.
Yeah, and so this has been our own worst enemy in these cases because consumers have seen this and they're like, well, I'm never going to buy one of those cool gadgets ever again because it may become orphaned. And it's really funny when we talk about IoT and connectivity and all that stuff. For me, it was really cool as a kid doing my first IoT-ish company, Real-Time Data in Bellevue, Washington, back in the mid-90s, doing the vending machine thing. My first experience, because it is about computing, but IoT inherently means I'm going to take the knowledge here and move it to a different location. We started that. Does everybody remember what a null modem cable is?
Sure.
DB9. So back then, in the olden days, Grandpa Rob here was using, that was the first test for networking of, I know what's going on in this vending machine, the inventory, blah, blah, blah. And we used a null modem cable to simulate network traffic going to our Windows 3.1 PC running Visual Basic app to tell you what was going on. And then it just expanded from there. These are all just convenience things to make things easier. That experience for me was the very hardest way possible to do IoT. And sometimes it was edgy, it was nearby, it was foggy. There was no such thing as a cloud. We actually pulled machines directly over Mobitex and weird networks and stuff like that. But you know what? It's all just abstractions and making things easier for people. I don't want to do the cliche, there's the right tool for the right job. If I'm doing an IoT solution that's outside and out and about, I probably want to call a cloud because that's the only thing I can connect to. If I'm in a building, I might do something locally. And depending on latency and security and data sovereignty, I may have to do something locally. If it's running in a factory, if it's running in a nuclear reactor, that stuff ain't leaving that nuclear reactor because Stuxnet is coming. So no cloud is no bueno there. It's just the right tool for the right job. And the fact that, it's just a different compute location, right? We have networking that's a LAN, a WAN, and we have compute all along that spectrum. Just put the compute where you need to based on your requirements, latency, security, whatever. No biggie.
Yeah.
So you just explained it in a way that's the way a customer wants to hear it. They want you to simplify it or make it sound simplified, because a lot of these things sound so complex that they just get scared and don't even want to mess with it. So that's a good way of putting it. That's the way you need to communicate.
Yeah.
Scaring our customers.
Yeah.
Another part of edge dynamic that Mark brought up, I think, is also something the industry needs to help with. Is there's also a whole spectrum, the fast food spectrum of small, supersize edge, right? It's microcontroller stuff, chipset level stuff, where power matters, where you want to bring AI workloads onto a super small device. And then you've got kind of the industrial IoT use case where you got a full room of servers that are driving applications at the edge, managing a steel facility or something like that. So, but as I think a lot of the activity seems to be on two levels, is getting smaller, like what Edge ML and all these kinds of things. So tools to help people go small, push more of these workloads more to the what was the term you used? Not the edge, the endpoint, right? The device. So that's one piece of it. But again, I think this whole manageability thing that Rob talks about, if we do it, if all this chaos ensues without the necessarily security and manageability stuff, it's going to be a real mess. So that we can't kind of lose sight of that. And there are some consortia trying to deal with that, open source projects trying to deal with that.
Well, and then you have the what I called on my LinkedIn comment, orchestration, that dovetail in a comment that Mark made of how do I remotely update the firmware on this thing. So firmware over the air. Those are critical, whether you have back to the endpoint, whether you have one endpoint that's part of a critical control system, or you have tens of thousands of millions of devices doing a smaller workload. How do you make sure that they are behaving the way they're supposed to be behaving in real time? Because when you find that vulnerability, you want to have that ability to patch it right then and there, not in, well, we know what happens when things don't get patched. So that's where my head went with what you were saying, Rick.
Right. My question is, and this maybe goes to the endpoint versus edge. I've always thought that's like just a staple feature of IoT, right? With some of the first M2M applications, that was the objective, is to update the MRI machine, right? That was a lot of upload log files for diagnostics. So it is managing devices at the edge, but it's sort of a blend. And maybe that's the trick, is we're sort of conflating the device and edge and endpoint and all that stuff. Does anybody think that, like, I'm curious, I would love to know the heritage of this term. Like, did it come from gateway vendors all of a sudden realizing, hey, I can run other workloads on that gateway? Or, I don't know. Anybody know the genesis of the term?
I have two etymology dictionaries, one in French, one in English. I don't think I'm going to find that word, but I'm going to take a look after this.
I can give you suggestions on what I think the sequence is in terms of how the term emerged. I think it originally started off in the OT world, right? And then now recently it's been adopted in the telco world, or the CT world, because of the repurposing, sort of this re-architecting of, base stations and central offices, things that are in between the central cloud, okay, and the endpoints, right? So so you have edge now becoming exciting to the IT folks who are typically familiar with on-prem stuff and having stuff in there, either managed or data centers, right? And so they're looking at it going, oh, there's something in the middle. And it's all being catered to by these edge developments in the CT world. And then now when you look at the OT world kind of converging with the enterprise IT world, you have a much broader suite of applications that now enterprises can pursue as part of their IoT initiatives, right? So when you look at what a CIO is going to be responsible going forward is going to be quite a bit of operational technologies and having to work with their constituents within the enterprise to figure out, well, how do we make all this stuff work? And that means now having a deeper relationship with their CT vendors as well as developing a relationship with their OT vendors. So I think that's how, that's sort of the genealogy of edge in my mind, and what it means for the end user, basically, right?
The first time I heard the term, I had heard the term a few times, but not really someone who kind of presented it in a more formalized fashion might have been 2-3 years ago, Dell. And it was their hardware guys, and they were actually talking about edge versus fog versus cloud, and with their EdgeX platform, and they were kind of going through all of the different use cases and why would you even need edge. And that was like the first time that I heard someone really walk through and explain it. But when they came about it from a hardware perspective, and what hardware would you need. And so that kind of opened my eyes. But then the conversations from then on started moving more towards software and analytics and things that were happening at the edge that you could do as a result of that hardware. So I think that it continues to evolve, but customers want to understand, especially if they've made quite a bit of investments from a cloud perspective, whether they're working with Azure or AWS or something else, they want to know what the impact is and what are really the use cases and how does it really apply to me. So I think that's what customers are really looking at. And I would say the other dynamic is edge computing versus edge analytics. And to me, edge analytics is also one of those gray terms where it's like as a service, or it's all software related. You can do some things and push out critical information quickly. But I think that, from an evolution perspective, it's 2-3 years ago we started hearing it. And now today, I hear more of the term being used in combination with 5G. So the market really pushing the fact that we're moving, and of course today there's announcements that this carrier or that carrier is, completely 5G nationwide. So now that's kind of taking place. But they're combining that 5G marketing message with edge. So 5G and edge have kind of really come together from a push perspective to enterprises.
What would you call this? This is where the terminology just gets muddied. A lot of the major cloud vendors have the ability to take their cloud stack and run it on equipment on a aircraft carrier or on a locomotive. Is that cloud? Is that edge? Is that something different? So I think perpetually it's just going to get conflated even more, right? These terms, but yeah. I don't get hung up on the term.
I mean, they call it edge cloud, and it's enabled by telco cloud, and this.
You use both terms so you could cover your bases.
Yeah,
just add let. You said cloudlet last week. If you add let onto anything, it's you can charge more for it.
People are just trying to sell stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's what
IoT lit, gateway lit.
Yeah. So, hey, we're coming up on that time again. I can't believe it. This thing went really fast.
Keep on social media.
Then we can't market IoT Coffee Talk. Come on.
Yeah. LinkedIn is not on there. I want
That's true. I see it.
So
LinkedIn's allowed.
Let's give Marc the final word since he's been so quiet and we haven't given him a lot of space to talk. So, Marc, why don't you take us out?
No, actually, no. It's really interesting to see the vision of everyone here at the IoT Coffee Talk. And actually, I think we haven't talked about the business models, no?
Yeah.
At the end.
Oh.
So said last time, I think needs to. So it's easy to sell or to have a catalog with all these cloudlets, gateways, super expensive gateways with I don't know how many gigs of RAM, etc. But needs at the end. You need to sell it, and there's need to have like a business case that makes sense for companies to put that on production. So I think technology is there. Technology is there is no silver bullet, so technology is very can be changeable and for every customer, etc. But needs. I haven't seen on edge computing still like a business case, like a solid business case. I don't know if you have seen that.
Well, you know what? I think those are great suggestions for.
Hey, there is people that want to answer that.
Where are you?
I'm in a tiny village, actually.
Wow.
I have a fiber at home. So like 100 people village in the middle of the Pyrenees.
Really?
So like 1 gigabit per second of fiber now. So
is that
working from here.
Is that a Zoom background? Can I download it?
Exactly,
Can you prove it? Can you prove it?
Let me open the...
Stephanie's forcing us all to step our game up.
Yes.
Gotta prove it.
Well, today mine's kind of boring in this RV, but I had to move inside. The storm came out, and we have one of those automatic covers, and it senses the wind getting too high, and so my coverage all of a sudden closed, and I was like, trying to grab everything.
You know, I hate to hijack trying to end the show, but the idea...
Dude, no, wait. Look, listen, if you're going to hijack it, you finish it, okay, bro? You take us out, bro.
Let me give you a business case of the edge, since I was born in West Texas. This is so obvious. If you got a pump jack, a drilling rig out in the middle of West Texas, and you're not close to anything, you may need an edge thing sitting next to your pump jack doing its deal, because it may have intermittent or no connectivity to any cloud or anything. And it needs to talk to that pump jack and look at all the sensors, and it needs to make decisions in its little brain right here and take care of problems. That's kind of the edge, right? It was gateways, and we call it different stuff, and gateways got smart. They used to look like routers. They passed through data from an endpoint out to somewhere else, and then we said, oh, it's a computer. I can do stuff here. It's really that simple. Intermittent is just like the stuff we learned doing mobile apps, right? You know, you're not connected, and you need to be able to work offline. You need to do things offline, and then you can connect.
I'm sure that you are using VMware to get access to that computer. I have seen that.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's actually edge computing as well, or not?
Why not? You need to push a VMware VM down to this thing if you want to be able to talk to this thing. I'm sure there are a whole sales force that's saying that right now. I believe that.
Well,
I'll believe anything.
Since Leonard's still recording, I have a correction to make. I called Stephanie's glasses Linda Blair, but Linda Blair was the gal from The Exorcist. I meant Linda Hamilton.
Uh-oh.
So
there you go.
myself,
thank you very much.
Fact checking myself.
Great. And on that note, thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time. In fact, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.